Hello, everyone. Today we just want to talk about what you need to know about R. If you've taken one of my classes or Sarah's classes, you've probably used R a little bit. If you haven't, then maybe this is really intimidating. What I want to highlight is that there's specific things to focus on, and remember that this isn't an R class. R is just a tool that we're going to be using. I'm going to say why we picked it in a moment. But I want to make sure that you understand you don't need to know everything about R and be able to understand all the little pieces. Instead, you just need to understand the stuff that we go over in class. That's it. So I do think that this is true. R is the bomb, and I think essentially everyone thinks that eventually if they really give it the time that it deserves. We're using it in this class because it's free. It's almost always up to date. It has really good data visualizations. I'm a little biased, but I think it's the best out there. It's syntax oriented, which means it's easy to reproduce your analyses. So this one's easy to overlook, but say you are trying to present some results and someone asks, well, how'd you do that? Did you remember to do this? If it's been a little bit of time, a couple weeks, maybe even months, you're not going to remember. But if you look at the syntax, you can see, oh yes, I did these things. And so you can have a really good response. Also, if you need to redo some analyses, it's really easy to just make minor changes and redo the whole thing. Another thing that's great about R is it gets updated regularly. And this is often because you actually can make your own functionality. You can create your own functions. Like I created a function called table1. We may end up using in this class. It's really nice because you can always make R do what you want it to. I didn't really sit on the free idea very long, but with the pandemic that's been happening, it's been really clear that if you don't have a lot of licenses to something like SPSS or SAS or Stata, and now you're stuck at home, you may just be out of luck. Unless you use something like R that is free and you can download on any computer you have. Now, the issues with using R is usually that there's a learning curve. You need to understand the language a little bit in order to use it. Sometimes people focus on too much of it, which makes the learning curve much harder, where people are trying to understand everything that happens instead of just focusing on what is most important, especially in this class. The other issue is sometimes your advisors or coworkers don't use it, and that's okay. R works well with just about every other program, so even if they use something else, you can bring in their data pretty easily. To start, I want to talk about how R works. What's nice is R sees things a lot like how we do. It uses objects and functions. In general, R sees data as an object. It's like a table or a chair, something that can be moved or adjusted or looked at. Whenever it does anything, it's going to use what's called a function. And lots of functions are included in what are called packages or outside packages created by people outside of the R world, people like you and me, that can create things that can do even more stuff in R. One of the core ones that we're going to use in this class is called the TidyVerse. It's a group of packages that do awesome things simply, and they use a very similar syntax, so it's easy to go between a lot of different functions. When you think of objects, they're like a physical object, where there are things that they're really good for and things that they're not. So a bed is good to sleep on, a table not so much. You probably can make it work, but it's not great. R is going to use virtual objects, and the two that we're really going to focus on are called data frames and vectors. Vectors are individual variables, so if you're thinking about like an Excel file with spreadsheets, a vector is going to just be a single column. One way that you can make it is right here. You can just give it a name. This could be any name. It's just a name that we're giving it. This arrow part is saying we want to assign whatever is on this side to this name. In this case, what it's doing, the C function just glues everything together into a vector. What this ends up creating is X is a vector with the numbers 5, 3, 4, and 1 inside of it. We can come back to X whenever we want in this session to find those numbers. Those numbers will stay in there unless we do something to it. When we glue multiple vectors together, we create what's called a data frame. Now quickly, a vector can be a lot of different types. It can be a number, so numeric. It can be a word, which is a character, or a factor, which is predefined categories, which can be really useful for some of the analyses we'll do in the class. The data frame is just a group of vectors. Down here we have a data frame we just call DF, which is a common name for data frame because of DF. But it could be any name. It could be Jimmy, Susan, whatever name we gave it when we were bringing the data in or assigning it like we did over here. So here we have X and Y in our data frame. Because functions are so important in R, I'm going to just give you a little bit more background on them. Again, it's how we do stuff in R. The TidyVerse is basically like writing English, which is really nice. That's why we're going to use a TidyVerse way. It uses verbs, and those always end with parentheses. Those are going to be functions. They're going to do stuff. And then inside of the parentheses, we're going to have subjects, objects, adverbs, and adjectives. So it's just like a sentence. We're going to tie statements together with that thing. So this right here is called a pipe. It's percent, caret, percent. The way that you're going to read it in English terms is it's just going to be read as and then. So I want you to consider this fake code here. What is it trying to do? All right, so this is just fake code. Remember that. This is not going to actually do anything in R. But let's try to read it. So what this is going to do is it's going to take me, that is this first thing that we're taking, and then we're going to wake up, or I'm going to wake up. It looks like at 8 a.m. And then I'll shower with warm water, preferably. And 15, maybe that's referring to minutes that I'm in the shower, so 15. And then eat breakfast, which looks like I'm going to eat fruit. So the thing to take note of is we're taking an object, we're going to do things to it. So this is a verb, and this is a verb. They're all verbs that are going to do something to the object, which in this case is me. Hopefully this is making some sense. We're going to get lots of examples in this class of using verbs like this, and we're going to use a pipe quite a bit because it makes the code a lot more user-friendly. It's a lot easier to read. So I mentioned packages a minute ago. To get these, we're going to need to install them first. When you install a package, you can click on the Packages tab in RStudio. If you open up RStudio, usually on the right-hand side, bottom, there's going to be a Packages tab. If you click on that, and then there's going to be a button that is Install, then it's going to have a pop-up message, and you can write the name of the package you want to install, like the TidyVerse. Click Install and wait for it to download and install. With the TidyVerse, it's going to download a lot of packages. It's a lot of things all kind of grouped together. So it might take a little bit, but once that's done, that's not doing anything anymore. It's installed on your computer. So you can picture that as like ordering a package from Amazon. We ordered it by clicking install, and then it gets delivered to our house. That's like downloading and installing it on the computer. But then to actually use the stuff inside the package, we got to open up the box. To open up the box, we're going to run library. That's going to be the code that we use, and then the package name inside, like TidyVerse. And it's best to put that at the beginning of your script or the R Markdown file, which we'll talk about more in the class, the difference between those two things. You just want to have that at the beginning so that you unpack it right at the beginning and have everything that you need throughout the whole session that you're using R. At the end of the session, when you close things, it's like us cleaning up, putting everything back in the box and putting the box away. So the next time that we use R, we need to run library package name again in order to get the stuff out of the box. So the important first steps in R, we need to read in the data. That's usually the most difficult part when you're just starting out. So it's okay if it's going to take you a little bit and you run into errors. That's fine. But that's going to be our first step. And then we want to quickly assess the data, make sure everything looks the way that we expected it to. We want to clean up the data and then analyze the data. This class is going to focus on number 4 by far the most. But we will show examples of 1 through 3 as well. When we are reading in the data, data will come in various files. It might be a CSV, which stands for comma separated values. It might be tab delimited, where it's separated by tabs. So each value has a tab between it. You might get SPSS data. Your advisor may be like, here's some data, and it's an SPSS file. Or Excel, that's really common. Or these other less common ones like SAS, data, and M+. All of these things can be read into R, which is really helpful. What's nice is that generally all works in a similar way. If your data, let's say, is called mydatafile.csv, then we could read it in using Rio import. Now it's really important here. What this is doing is it's saying this is the package, and then the colon is saying this is the function. So I mentioned one way to open up the box is by running library package name. What that does is it opens the box and dumps out everything that's inside of it so we can use all of it. What this is going to do is it's just like reaching into the box that is the Rio package and just grabbing import. That's it. We're leaving everything else in there. We're just grabbing import and just using it one time. So after we use it, then we just put it away. By looking at this code right here, are you able to kind of think what this might be doing? It's okay if you don't yet, but give it some thought. What is this line of code trying to do? Well, first we talked about what this is doing. It's using this import function. We don't maybe know exactly what the import function is doing, but it's using some file name. What this really does is it just imports that data. It finds that file and we'll just import it. And then we assign it to a name. If we want to use this data in the session and do stuff with it, we got to give it a name. If we don't run this part and we only ran this part, R would just print out the contents of the data set and then it would forget about it because it doesn't have a name for it. It just would read it in, say, this is what I saw, and then let go of it. To keep it, we got to assign it. So that's for a CSV file. What if your file is in an Excel format, so XLSX? Well, we can use Rio import for that too. What if it's an SPSS? Well, we can use Rio import for that too. The only differences you're seeing here is that we need to give it the proper file name. So .sav for SPSS or .xlsx for Excel, etc. So in general, this is how we're going to be importing data. What's really important when you're reading in data is that your data, the data set, is in the same folder as your R Markdown file that we're going to be using, which I'll highlight a little bit more in just a moment. Steps for preparing the data analysis. We want to get the data, clean the data, which maybe means changing variable labels, value labels, missing values, understanding what those are. We may want to compute new variables and values. We might want to fill in missing codes, like if your data is like -99, if it's missing, we may want to do something with that to tell R that that's actually missing, and it's not actually meaning -99 of whatever that variable is. We may want to recode scores. We may want to reverse code them. We may want to categorize our group values, combine them. All of those things are these steps for preparing the data for analysis. It's all about cleaning and computing. It gets the data ready so that we actually can get information out. And then we want to get descriptives. We want to make sure that the data look as we expect. From the furniture package, there's two functions. There's table F, which gives us frequencies, and table 1 that gives us counts and means depending on the type of variable. We're going to do an example with the GSS reduced example that I provide. In this case, it's in a data folder in the same folder as this R Markdown. So I just tell it that's in the data folder, and then it's the GSS reduced example.csv. This reads it in, assigns it to the name D. I just use D, the letter D. And then this prints it out so I can see what's inside of it. And this is what we would see if we were doing that. There's more to it that doesn't show on the screen, just so you're aware. Step 2, we want to prepare the data. We're going to use the TidyVerse and Janitor packages. Janitor, as you can guess, cleans data. So we're going to walk through what this pipeline is saying and what it's going to do, and we can see what it did to the data. First thing, we're grabbing our D object, which was our data that we just read in. And we're going to assign this whole pipeline, everything that we do, to a name called dclean. Again, we could call that anything we want. Jimmy, Susan, it just needs to be one word. You can do underscores and dots, that's fine too, if you're combining words. So we're taking D, and then we clean the names. Cleaning the names just makes them all lowercase and takes out anything that makes it hard to work with the name. This actually can save you a lot of time, and your pinky will thank you, so you don't have to press shift all the time. And then we're going to remove empty columns and remove empty rows. So if there's any variables in there that are just blank all the way through, this will drop those. They're not rows that we need to keep anyway. And then here, the mutate is creating a factor version of the marital function. So we're just renaming it, same thing, where we're saying to R that marital is a categorical variable. That's what factor is doing. In this case, marital came in, it looked like a number. It was just zeros and ones, or ones and twos, I can't remember, which to R just looks like a number. So factor tells it, oh, that is actually not a number, it is a factor. It's a category. We do the same thing with degree and party ID. And notably, we pipe each time. So we say, we grab D, then clean the names, then remove empty columns, and then remove empty rows, and then mutate marital to be a factor, and then mutate degree to be a factor, and then mutate party ID to be a factor. But then we don't have a pipe here because we're done with this statement. So it's like a period when we don't include a pipe at the end. It's saying we're done with that statement, no more. That means that everything here is now saved inside of dclean. Dclean, when we print it out, now looks like this. If you remember what the data looked like a second ago, Mostly at this point, it didn't do a whole lot because this data had already been cleaned up a little bit. But most of your data sets, that when you're actually bringing in new data, it's probably going to do a lot to it. It's going to clean up the names, make things more useful. Third step, we want to compute new variables or values. In this case, we are getting the row mean, so we're getting the mean of each row for all of these different variables that are in the data set. And we're naming it nat spend. And in this case, I show the code, I show where these functions are coming from. When we loaded the TidyVerse, we dumped out these functions, the mutate function, so that we have that one. So we don't need to use dplyr : but we can. It's like double checking if we actually have that function. The furniture part though, if we haven't loaded the furniture package, we need to use furniture : to get the row means function. We can look at what this does. We're just grabbing dclean and reassigning it as dclean. So we're not really making any changes to the name. We're just adding a new variable here. So we're grabbing dclean and then adding nat spend, which is the row means of all of these variables. And you can see this, it is the mean of 1, 1, 1, 1, 3, 1, 1, etc., which apparently the mean is about 1.5-ish. And then once we've done all these things to the data, we want to get descriptives. We want to make sure that everything looks the way that we expect. One way to do this is using the furniture package's table F function. So if we grab dclean and we give it a variable name, in this case degree, we want to check degree, make sure it looks good. What it's going to do is it's going to tell us all the levels. So less than high school, associates, bachelor's, graduate, and high school. Note that we haven't told it what order it should go in, so it just went alphabetically. The frequencies are here. So in this data, we have nearly 300 individuals with less than high school, a little over 1,000 with just a high school degree, 173 with an associate's degree, 355 with a bachelor's, and 194 with a graduate degree, with one missing. So one individual of all of those, of all the 2023 cases, one of those is missing. Can do this with the marital status variable too. Again, it's given us the frequencies here, how many are missing. This is the cumulative frequency, and the total sample size is there. And then we also can get means and standard deviations by group. What we're going to do here is we grab dclean and then we group by degree, and we create table 1 with the nat spend and nat city variables. What this does is by degree, because that's what we're grouping by, we get the counts up here and the means and standard deviations of both of these variables. The table 1 function is really flexible. We'll use it for a couple of things just to understand our data. You can throw in as many variables as you want here, and you can group by more than one variable if you want as well. So this is a really brief introduction to R. I want to say there's a couple ways to make it easier. Again, focus on what's necessary and don't worry about the rest. So if there are other things that I didn't really bring up in the code, then it may not be the most important thing to focus on right now. For example, I didn't talk about spacing. Notably, I put each new line or each part of the statement on a new line. You don't have to do that. It just, in my mind, it makes it look easier to read. The spacing doesn't matter either. Those are things that may feel really important, but aren't. But it never hurts to ask. Just ask, are those things important? And if they're not, I'll let you know. Another thing is use the homework as opportunities to learn. As I mentioned in this class, we do homework in the in-class example, so we're going to be going through the homework together. Use it as an opportunity to learn. It's not designed to be busy work. I kept them as short as possible that give you some good examples to learn from and give you opportunities to actually try some coding. Also use the resources around you. The in-class examples are going to be really important. Google is great. You can say how to do this in R. There's also online books, including mine, which is very much a rough draft. There's a lot of good books out there that are free online books that will walk you through how to use R. All right, so before we go into the next topic, I'm just going to open up RStudio and show you around a little bit and what an R Markdown file is. And then from there, we will move on to the next topic, which is causation. So here's RStudio. When you open it up for the first time, this is kind of what it looks like. It usually has the 3 panels open like this. This first one is the console. It also does a few other things for us that we won't talk about right now. It also has this environment tab. And then it has this one that has files, plots, packages, help, and viewer. We're going to use this a lot. The packages especially we already talked about. When I'm talking about R Markdown, if you come up here to the plus, we can start a new R Markdown here. If I click on this, if you've never used R Markdown before, it's going to tell you need to install some packages. Just say install. And then it's going to give us this menu to pick from. We can adjust any of this at any point, so let's just say OK. What it's going to do is open up what is just a text file. This is nothing more than text here. Up here we have the title and author, all these things that we can change. I can change this to R Markdown. It also comes with a few pieces already put in there for us that we don't really need, but you can kind of see how it works. So what this does is this is going to be some options that allow us to control some stuff. You can ignore it for now. This is going to be regular text. The hash marks just mean you're doing a header. So 2 is a second level header, 1 hash would be a first level header. And then anything like this is just text. And then everything inside of the ticks, the 3 ticks, and then R with curly brackets around it, and then the 3 ticks at the end, this is all R code. So this is R code right here. And then again, we have more text, and then we have R code. If we were just to knit this, it's going to run all the R code and put the output in there. Let me save this real quick, just to my desktop. Call it example. Save. What this does is it produces this output that shows the code that led to the output, including plots. You can see this is a header, and then you just have regular text below it, just like we were expecting up here. So R Markdown is just a way to put text, code, and output all together, which can save you a ton of time because you can just keep track of what you're doing, run it, and have the output all in a single document. So what I mentioned before, if we go up near the top, we can insert a new code chunk. We click on R. It can handle a lot of different languages. We're going to just do R right now. And here we can do library TidyVerse. And that, when we run that, which you can run it by clicking on the play button, run the current chunk, or just to run that line, you can do Command Enter or Control Enter, depending on if you're a Mac or PC. I'm just going to do Command Enter because I'm on a Mac. And it's going to run some things for me. It's going to say it's doing a bunch of stuff. This is what the TidyVerse does. You can ignore most of this. At some point, if you get into R, you'll understand what all this means, but it's just telling you that it's importing or loading a bunch of packages. We also want to do janitor. That one's going to be really common. And we're also going to do furniture. So we could run the whole chunk just by clicking that. It'll run all 3 lines. And the output just shows up here for now. And again, we could just knit this. And it would create the document for us. A few notes about R Markdown. You're not going to know everything right now. That's okay. But you can run stuff live. So by just clicking on this, we're running it right now. Or I can knit, which just runs the whole document all at once and will output it. In this case, up here, we are just choosing an HTML document. So it produces a document that is .html that you can open up in any browser. We're going to be doing most of our work in R Markdown, so you're going to get plenty of practice. I'm going to provide templates for you to use for the homework, and you're just going to be filling in the code and answers inside of there. Hopefully this was a good introduction. If you're confused about anything, make sure you reach out. Oh, one last thing that I wanted to highlight is packages. If you need to install them, click on it here and then install. And this is where you just type it in like TidyVerse or janitor, etc. And then you'd say install and it would do it